USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. A look at this weekend in college hockey and a review of the top news of the week.
Welcome to USCHO Weekend Review for Monday, February 7th, 2022. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. This podcast is brought to you by DCU Digital Federal Credit Union. What will DCU mean to you? Find out today by visiting dcu.org. Membership required. Well, it was a pretty stable weekend for the top 20 in the USCHO poll. Let's start with Denver. Now, maybe this is the only thing I've gotten right all season, but I've been pretty high on the Pioneers from back in November. They swept number 7 St. Cloud State, a 8-5 win on Friday after coming back from a 3-0 deficit and a tight 2-0 win on Saturday. How about the Pioneers? Are they somebody we should be talking about as being a number 1 team?
Well, I think we talked about this 3 weeks ago when they were just sneaking up on us. And I think, no, they're not sneaking up on anybody right now anymore. They just keep winning hockey games. They find different ways to do it. I mean, they've got 20 wins already. If 20 wins is if 20 wins is the gold standard of wins, they've got 20. They're 25-1, a .788 winning percentage. That's unbelievable, and a team which nobody gave the credit that they probably deserved at the beginning. They have not lost in 2022. They have a tie. Against Fairbanks, which meant they didn't play overtime. But to beat Omaha twice, Colorado College twice, Miami twice, you go, those are middle to bottom end teams in the NCHC. But then to go and beat St. Cloud the way they did, 2 different types of games, they're for real, and they're here.
I love when a program can prove that they can win both a wild run and gun shootout, and then they can tighten things up, post a shutout, and only get 2 goals and win. I mean, that when you're proving to me that you can win a game no matter what it takes. I mean, those chameleon-like teams, they win national championships because they can get into those games where the opponent decides, hey, we're going to try to play up tempo. We're going to try to play fast. This is going to be a lot of odd man rushes and scoring chances. And then we're also going to be able to lock it down. And I think that, this weekend proved a ton. Not that I was that far out on this one. I've been kind of thinking about Denver a lot since the beginning of the year. And the only reason we weren't is because they had some trouble last year. I mean, don't forget that we're only kind of ignoring Denver because they had a little bit of a down year at times last year. They finished great. They really struggled from the start. But, you take the second half of the season for them, top notch. And then this season, there's really been very few blips on their radar.
How about this stat? 9 games since January 1, they've given up 17 goals. Within that 17 goals, this is the crazy. They've given up 4 once or twice, and they've given up 5 once. So in 3 of those 9 games, they've given up 13 of their 17 goals.
That's pretty good.
You think? You think. I mean, look at the shutouts they posted. 1 on Omaha, 2 on Colorado College. Then, I mean, you would think that they potentially could have got 1 against Miami. They gave up the most they've been given up. And then again on St. Cloud, pretty good. They're for real.
And they're doing that very consistently with a very young team. As we talked to David Carl last week, 16 freshmen and sophomores on that team.
I thought Air Force was the youngest team in the nation.
Well, David says he's second youngest. And, I think BC says they're the youngest. So, maybe we'll have to get Jerry and Frank and David around a table and hash it out. But, terrific weekend. And Denver is not somebody anybody's going to want to run up against in the tournament, whether it's the NCHC tournament or the NCAA tournament. Well, let's talk about Quinnipiac. They swept the weekend in the Capital District of New York, 1-0 over RPI on Saturday. That set the NCAA record-setting 13th shutout of the season. Greg Gardner had 12 of them all by himself for Niagara for the team record in 99-2000. Yaniv Peretz with 10 shutouts and Dylan St. Cyr with the other 3. Quinnipiac, they when we talked to Rand Pecknold, he was not expecting to have that out of his freshman, bringing in the transfer from Notre Dame, but now he's got a 1-2 punch. And, when you've got goaltending like that, you can go all the way.
There's no doubt about that. And it's not just goaltending, it's lockdown defense. They are one of the most difficult teams to create chances against. They know how to play within their zone. They're a puck possession team too, and they tend to possess the puck a lot. I haven't seen them actually in person play since the first week of the season at the Icebreaker. But, even then when they had some minor difficulties against Boston College in the early going of that, one of the opening game of the Icebreaker, they still were able to fight back and really probably should have won that game. That ended up being a 2-2 tie, and then BC won it in the shootout. And that was really the difference in the tournament. That's why BC won the Icebreaker. But, I look at this team. They are top to bottom, really solid. They have some good scorers on the team that can put up numbers. But, as we just said, they can win those really high scoring games, but they're not going to be the team giving up a lot of goals. They'll win the high scoring games 7-0, 8-0, 8-1. That's the type of team that I think that Quinnipiac is. I don't want to play them anytime in the postseason. When you you go back to some of these teams, Duluth, when they were on their runs, last year's UMass team, look at UMass in the postseason last year, barely gave up any goals in the NCAA tournament in 4 games. That's tough when you're not even able to generate chances and you have a team breathing down on you. It takes so much of the room for error out of the game. And you can't make mistakes against Quinnipiac.
Well, first of all, congratulations to Rand Pecknold, who coached his 1,000th game. That's a pretty good feat. That means you've done something really well. Love him or hate him, which I like Rand. He's always been good to me in our programs. But like I said, love him or hate him out there. 1,000 games shows longevity. It shows a lot of wins, and right now he's got things rolling. You talk about scoring. They haven't scored a lot lately, though. They've only scored 8 goals in their last 4 games. But when you only give up 3 goals in your last 4 games, 8 goals is plenty. So I would watch out Brown Bears on Tuesday, because I bet you they're ready to unleash a little bit of offense. And I think if you go and ask, was it Princeton that took the football score? They took a 6-0 and a 9-0. They gave up. Do you think that Princeton would have done well, only giving up 5 field goals in 2 games? This could be Tuesday night. It'll be really interesting to see if the Guns come out ablazing offensively after only scoring 8 goals in their last 4 games.
The other part to that too is how condensed their schedule has become. They had almost no games at the beginning of January because of COVID cancellations. Now they're playing a lot of 5 and 7, 5 and 8 days. Talking to Rand a few weeks ago, he said this is like an NHL schedule, and I love it. Some coaches want that for their college teams. They'd rather be out there playing more games, lighter practices, and it seems to be working right now for Quinnipiac.
Pretty hard not hard, but rumor out there is he's not been thrilled with how they're playing. But he's a perfectionist, and he knows they've got close, but they haven't got to the top of that mountain yet. And this could be a team that gets there. And like I said, he's got them going on all buttons. Sometimes the best coaches know when to push. Sometimes you back off when you're in a losing streak. Sometimes you keep pushing when you're winning, and because you don't want to get complacent. You don't want to get there and get fat and think it's going to be easy. I'm sure Rand's probably telling them this is a trap game right now. They're playing a team that has had some difficulties this year in Brown, and probably pushing them. And this will be an interesting result Tuesday night.
It's going to be really tough for Quinnipiac to move into being a number one seed in the regionals in the NCAAs. They're fifth in the PairWise right now. Quite a bit of a gap in the RPI between Western Michigan and them. This is a case where the bottom of the ECAC is not helping them at all.
Right, certainly, that's an issue for the entire league. That right now, the ECAC's non-conference winning percentage wasn't high, and it's pulling down their overall RPI for the conference. Thus, even a near perfect record that Quinnipiac has is not helping them. I think that if they go through their tournament unblemished, they'll probably be okay. They might be able to jump up into one of those number one seeds, because you have to figure that one of the seeds ahead of you, good chance that they're going to lose because of the fact that, at least two of those teams are in the NCHC. So I think that there's a good chance that if they can, put a pretty clean sheet ahead of them and win their conference championship, you'll get some big games in there against, the top of the league. That could help them boost them in. But you're right. They're not going to be a team that's going to be a number one overall seed, despite the fact that by the end of the season, they might have the best overall winning percentage.
So how about this question? Are you better off being the best number two seed and playing the least of the number threes? I mean, somebody pulls off an upset as a fourth seed every year.
I don't know. Schools, you're the coach on that one. I want to be as high as I can in every single standing, ranking, anything. You still have to take the pot odds that you can get your team up, even if you're a number one seed, to beat a number four.
Yeah, I think you're right. And you know what? I think the one thing that's going to change this year is the day off in the regionals. You're going to see a little bit of difference. Whether the number one seed had to play the night game for TV and then they had to turn around and play. There's no excuses now. All excuses of when you played, how you played, how long your game went, all of that is off the book. Now it's come down to, you got to win 2 games over 3 days, which is completely opposite than what we asked them to do all year. So it'll be interesting to see how they respond to that. I think it may be different. We asked teams to win Friday and Saturday or Saturday, Sunday, back-to-back games. Now we're going to put a day off in between there, and we're going to see things maybe a little bit different. I don't know. You tell me, because it changes what you do in the day. It changes recovery. Sometimes the best games to play are like noon, game 2, because you don't have a lot of time to overthink. You don't have a lot of time to try to make too much adjustments. You don't have a lot of time to micromanage that 12th or 13th forward. Should we make a change on that one guy that played 7 minutes? And you get more time to spend on that. I mean, there's just a lot of factors that come into that. And while it may seem like the right thing to do, I guess we'll see, because sometimes you just want to get after it again.
What about from this angle, though? You talk about making those tweaks and so forth, and you're doing that late at night after your game, before a game the next day. You get a good night's sleep. You don't have to watch video, and you have the next day to kind of look at it with fresh eyes and maybe a calmer head. Do you think there's an advantage there for you as a coaching staff?
When are you getting a good night's sleep when you're in a regional?
Well, you at least go to bed.
Oh yeah, you're the problem that you have, the high of playing is so high that it takes you such a long time to come down from it. And if you're playing if you're done at 4:00, well then, one of the neatest games I ever played, we thought was great. We played a morning game against Sacred Heart for kids, the kids game at 10:00. We were having a post-game meal at 2 and done with everything by 4:00. And then we didn't know what to do with our Friday night. But I think you never get, this is the NCAA tournament. You're not going to be getting a good night's rest because you're going to have something to worry about. An injury, you're going to be up thinking about something. Do we need to make this change? So you're assuming a good night's sleep. It's just postponing and pushing it off. It might be better to just get after it.
Well, there you go. And then get a longer nap the next day.
Pre-game naps are the best. I'll tell you that. That's the one thing I miss right now is the excuse to take a nap on the day of the game. Pre-game naps, best thing ever invented for hockey players. And somehow coaches now need them too, which is, I mean, it's part of work. I got to take a nap. It is
It
what
helps
it
you
is.
relate with the players, you know?
I still use them when I'm broadcasting games. I still try to sleep somewhere around 1:00 in the afternoon for a good half hour to 45 minutes.
I get a good pregame meal, even though you're not playing, carb load, and be in a stupor of food, a food coma.
That's one of the things that's one of our catchphrases with our broadcast team. We go and get pasta before the game and say, radio guys got a carbo load too. So there you go. Let's turn to Cornell. We heard the news a little bit ago from Mike Schafer. First, he was out with COVID, and then out some more, a stent put in an artery. So some minor heart surgery. That's kept him away from the Big Red bench. And it's not been a great stretch for Cornell. A loss to Brown and Colgate, and then a tie with Colgate as they play their travel partner home and home. What's the impact on Mike's absence from the bench, and what's going on with Cornell?
Well, I played for Mike for 4 years at Western Michigan. I worked for him for a year at Cornell and was on the rules committee with him. Obviously, I go way back with Mike, and I texted him after that. It had been pretty quiet. I hadn't heard that in the circle. So as soon as that came out, I texted him. He responded right away, said thanks. And then I said, well, at least in the 5 years that I played for you and worked for you, I never caused this. And I didn't get a response. I thought it was funny. I didn't get a response. So his sense of humor, his infectious personality with the players, obviously that's going to be weighing on their minds. He's such a good coach and such a good motivator. And Ben Sire is always been the name mentioned as the next head coach. But it's hard to replace somebody like that. Can you do it for one game? Because I think we joked earlier in the year that Ben Sire was pretty hot when he replaced Schafer, when Schafer always said some things wrong in the media or did some things to get himself a one game watching from the stands. But it's hard on a full-time basis because you can get up for that, once again, that high for one time. Let's do it for Benny. Then now you're worried about, how's Schafer doing? And those things preoccupy him. My thoughts are with Mike, and, I told him that. And like I said, I'm glad I didn't cause it, but it's got to be hard on those kids. They are kids, and that's a person that you look up to, and Mike Schafer, and you're worried about him.
You mentioned something there about his sense of humor and personality, infectious personality. That doesn't always come across to the public. He tends to be very serious and kind of succinct in media appearances. Is there a side of Mike Schafer that fans and media don't see?
Oh, he's sarcastic. He's his sarcasm and his sense of humor. I mean, he would always do that circle game where he'd try to give you the circle, and then he'd have to 2 shots, and then you do it to him, and he wouldn't take it. I mean, he's my thoughts are with him. He's got a tremendous personality, and it's easy to see from the inside of a team, and I could see where, as a media person, because you're always getting him when after a game you're happy and you want to go to watch video, or he wears his heart on his sleeve. I mean, how many times has he said stuff that's got him a game? I mean, he's not giving you coach speak.
No, I think, that's probably what's missing from the locker room right now. And I love Ben Sire. I love Sean Flanagan. Those are 2 really great, top-notch assistant coaches. I've known both of them for a long time, and they're doing, I'm sure, a bang-up job trying to keep this team on the tracks. But when you have a coach that is not just the personality, but the great credentials, the experience of Mike Schafer. And I'm sure, despite doctor's orders, he's probably still doing too much work, even from home or wherever he is, convalescing right now. But those guys, they'll get it back on, I guarantee you. But it can be tough. It's hard to miss one of the legends of hockey, and that's what I think you have to put Mike Schafer into that category.
And you've got the ECAC playoffs coming up, and really, except for Quinnipiac, the only route for anybody else in that league is going to be through the playoffs. And maybe I'm giving away a little bit of our next segment, but when it's wide open like that for the playoffs, except for Quinnipiac, you've got opportunity.
And there I go. I usually am the one that gets accused of giving away our next segment. Come on, Ed.
I know I'm taking your job. You just signed that contract, so I mean, you gotta give somebody else some opportunity, I guess. By the way, congratulations on that.
I don't even know what your question was, but thank you. I appreciate that, and I'm excited.
By the way, yes, I want to say that congratulations on your extension at Robert Morris, and also, why don't we just drop this in? Hiring of Logan Biddle, one of the first players for you at Robert Morris, and somebody who's been part of the coaching staffs there. What does it mean to bring him in as a hire for the women's team?
Well, first of all, thank you. It's been an interesting time since May, but I think this shows the commitment hiring my extension and hiring Logan. I think that shows the commitment that Robert Morris has to hockey. We've got more donors. We've raised more money. We've got more board of trustees support. You see what we've done with these hires. And I think it just shows the support. Logan has earned his stripes. He was at Robert Morris on day one as a player, was gone for 2 years as playing pro hockey, but has been back as the women's staff ever since. And he bleeds Colonial red, white, and blue. He's married to probably our most famous alum, and Brianne McLaughlin, Olympian, 2 silver medals. And he's deserved this opportunity. He's ready for it. And it'll be good to have another alum to try to sell Robert Morris, because he's lived it. He's been there. He's lived it in all aspects. So I'm really happy for Logan.
Well, we're going to move on to our next segment after a break, and we're going to take a look at the PairWise, and we promise to limit the amount of math to a bare minimum so that your eyes or ears don't all glaze over. This episode of Weekend Review is brought to you by DCU, Digital Federal Credit Union. Visit dcu.org.
This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from US College Hockey Online.
Sometimes it's not about wanting a new car, it's about needing one. And I needed one I could rely on. So I got an auto loan with DCU. They offer the same low rates on both new and used cars, and I was able to borrow a little extra to make a used car as good as new. My auto loan from DCU means a ride I can finally rely on, which feels like a pretty big thing. What will DCU mean to you? Insured by NCUA. Membership required. Visit dcu.org.
Continuing now with Weekend Review. Jim, you've done some digging and used some software to kind of crunch the PairWise. And without getting into all the arcane numbers underneath, we can see what teams are locks, what teams are close, and what teams need to do a little work to get in. Why don't we start out? It seems there's one team that's in no matter what.
Yeah, I have Minnesota State as a lock right now. And listen, everybody uses different ways of calculating this. And some work to the T. But what we're going to talk about here are just probabilities, odds, the chance, you can watch, let's go back to a Super Bowl where the score was 28-3. The odds of Atlanta winning that Super Bowl were 99%, but there was still 1% chance that the Patriots could win, and they did. So let's just kind of always keep in mind when I say there's a chance that 99% doesn't work, it's not a guarantee. 99% is close, but I see Minnesota State as 100% right now. That's the only team I see as a 100% lock. Very close, right behind them, you can put Michigan, Denver, Western Michigan, Quinnipiac, Ohio State, and Notre Dame. I have them all at 99% right now. Does that mean that they're in? No. Something falls apart. You lose one of your best players. You might lose all the rest of your games and be eliminated in the first round of your conference tournament. Other teams then bump you out. You never know. So I will not call any of them locks right now. Two other teams that I'm going to put really high, Minnesota and UMass. Those two teams I have somewhere around 97%. So not guarantees on anybody except Minnesota State, but I like every one of those teams to make it. So that would, in my mind, put 9 teams very close to in the tournament. And then Duluth, Minnesota Duluth, St. Cloud State, they're both in the high 80%, and UMass Lowell around 82, 81%. So right now, we're not calling anybody locks except Minnesota State, but we're saying that a good portion of the field would have to collapse to not already talk about 12 teams that are in really good shape. So that really doesn't leave a lot for the rest of the at-large teams.
I want to hit on a couple that are up there high. Ohio State, Steve Rollick has done a great job with the Buckeyes this year. I don't know that anybody would have had them so close to being a lock at this point in time at the beginning of the season. What have the Buckeyes done well to put them in this position?
I think that they've executed, and they've had some of their underclassmen perform really well. And that was what Ohio State needed, was that, they needed some of the players that, weren't rolling off the tip of our tongues to have great seasons. And, we talked to Steve, I guess it's a little over a month ago, Ed, and, he liked his team coming in. Nobody else did. He was okay with that because I believe they were picked to finish last in the Big Ten. They're probably one of the biggest surprises in the whole country right now, not just the Big Ten. But they've performed, and their results, they continue to get results in a league that is performing very well in the PairWise. You have a lot of teams, and they did, we know that the NCHC had the best non-conference winning percentage. Big Ten was not far behind. And that's showing right now. When all those teams I just read off, I know Minnesota State is the ECAC, but Michigan, Denver, Western Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Minnesota Duluth, St. Cloud State, all of those teams come out of 2 leagues, the Big Ten and the NCAA. You can see how much their successful non-conference seasons were and what the effect that is having now as we're trying to look toward the NCAA fields.
Ohio State 8-2 non-conference. You want to know, you got to go in non-conference games. Did they get all the points? No, I think one of them they got 55% compared to 45, but you got to go get wins. And, they did that. And you see the fruits. I mean, once again, the magic 20, you're putting yourself in the mix when you get around 20 wins. And that's what Arizona State kept talking, 20, 21. And they're not going to be able to get there now with only 4 games left. And at 15, you've got to get to 20 wins unless you're going to win the conference tournament. The big thing of your whole first segment there, Jimmy, and I'm going to stay away from your math. Stay away from any of that. I'll let Ed do that. He's at RIT. They've got this they're like these geniuses there, something I don't know. But how about all the East-West bias? Are we going to have an East-West bias? Holy cow. That's a Western field, all West, minus, if you're 12 there, minus Quinnipiac and UMass.
And UMass Lowell.
And then you throw in UMass Lowell, 3. So you got 9. Even going to your next segment, we could have 4 to 5 Eastern teams here. I know Steve Metcalf's not going to like that because Steve called me and says he listens to the show and he groans he laughs at some of our jokes and he groans at some of the other stuff. Steve, I'm sorry. There could only be 5 Eastern teams in this NCAA tournament.
Yeah, it's quite possible right now. When we look at bubble teams, even those bubble teams, the teams that seem to have some of the best odds, Michigan Tech right now are around 60%, North Dakota a little above 50%. even the bubble doesn't look, hopeful for the Eastern team. So we always talk about attendance at regionals. Boy, Albany and Worcester could be a little thin. You will be almost forced to put as many Eastern teams in those two regions as you can if you want to protect attendance. I don't know if that will become as much of a priority this year, but you could have, at least one of the Western regionals with all Western teams. Nobody from, the East at all. Nobody from, possibly not even east of the Mississippi. You could see Loveland with, possibly say, Denver, Minnesota. You can't have Minnesota State probably in there, but let's say Denver, Western, North Dakota, and maybe Minnesota all in Loveland. I wouldn't be surprised to see something like that. That would be a crazy little region. If you go off your four that are down at the bottom, Michigan Tech, North Dakota, Northeastern Province, you just talked about, that's the 16, but you're going to lose one of those to the Atlantic Hockey. Right now, it would be AIC on odds. So you're going to lose Providence to there. The rest of your list is all Eastern. So now you're going to start bumping Eastern teams for Eastern teams. You're not bumping Eastern teams for Western teams unless you get a couple changes, because you got Northeastern, North Dakota, and Tech. You're going to have a couple upsets in the East to get up over those 5 and 6 mark. And you're right, Jimmy. You're going to see there's going to be a full Western regional for sure. And
again, it's all the out of conference winning record that creates these bands. And I want to correct one thing. It's actually the Big Ten with the best non-conference record right now. They are at 704 out of conference, which is phenomenal. NCHC at 631, and the only other league above 500 is Hockey East at 571, and which is why you're looking at the possibility of 3 teams in from Hockey East. But you look at the rest of it, you're only talking Tech and Minnesota State, because the CCHA is 484 out of conference. ECAC 428, Atlantic Hockey 324 out of conference. Which explains why you're probably only looking at 1, possibly 2 from the ECAC, only if Quinnipiac is upset. But you're only going to get 1 in from Atlantic Hockey, and it's going to be the league champion.
I talked to a CCHA coach today, and he said Michigan Tech is good enough to make the Frozen Four. He said they're that good. And they, believe it or not, and they're still not they're at 60% according to your program here, Jimmy. And they got to get in the tournament. You lose early and they're in that 60% range. They go in, they get a home ice and then lose to somebody. I don't know if they get in then too, because then they're waiting on people not to get bumped off. I mean, those bottom ones are going to be interesting. And AIC still potentially, if they go on a little bit of a run, they're going to increase those odds and do what they need to do. They could get to the championship and lose there and still potentially be 50%. It's going to be hard.
So this does factor in the odds of them winning the Atlantic Hockey Championship as well, which would, that's where most of the 29% comes from for AIC. They have the best odds to win the Atlantic Hockey Championship. So I think that whoever wins Atlantic Hockey is the only team in from that conference. I don't see AIC losing again and still finding a way in. It's just the strength of that conference, not good. Every loss hurts them. You saw where they were. 2 weeks ago, I think they were inside the top 16, but 1 loss to Holy Cross. Granted, that is the bottom team in your conference, but a loss to Holy Cross, and boom, the bottom fell out from underneath AIC. They're getting it back, but even the other night, not getting a full 100% in a tie. They get a tie and then losing a shootout to RIT. It's not good enough. They didn't have a lot of room for error, and they now have 0 room for error, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's like we were talking about last week. When you look at the volatility, there's a lot of volatility on the downside. It's very hard to move up. Right now, they're tied with Omaha at 19, which is essentially 20. It's going to be nearly impossible to climb to like 15 or 14.
By the way, I want to go back. Didn't get to make a point I want to make about Michigan Tech. You mentioned, any blips along the way. You lose a game, you lose a couple of games. Don't forget they have to close their season with Minnesota State. Regular season ends with Minnesota State. I know that those losses are not bad losses, but they're games that they could conceivably lose. And if they do, I don't know what that does to them. They might be in a position where they would have to win the conference tournament in the CCHA. That's kind of advanced math right now, but I one that my mind or no computer could do to know how much a loss or two losses potentially to Minnesota State could cost. But it's not like you're losing to the bottom of the league, but you're absolutely losing to the number one team, really, in my mind. But at the same time, losses are losses, and you're not going to be able to lose a lot of games down the stretch.
I'm going to ask a question here, and this is going to go back probably about 3 to 4 weeks on our show. Do you see another game being added? Is there somebody that can really benefit from adding a game right now after running these numbers to help them? We had talked about Arizona State adding a game. It doesn't need that. They don't waste the money now, in my opinion. But is there a team out there that could use a game that could help them if they have a game to give?
So that's interesting because I've had some conversations with both coaches and commissioners around college hockey of late, and the consensus seems to be that nobody will be doing it. It would almost have to be a perfect storm to even be able to consider it. You'd have to have been knocked out of your league tournament, probably in the quarterfinal or first round or whatever. You then have to still have games available to add. And then you would also have to find an opponent that had a benefit to them for adding that game. And they'd have to be in an almost exact same situation. So could it happen that maybe the teams that are 15 and 16 in the PairWise both, have one game left that they could still play and both be out and have a weekend open to do it? Maybe. It's not likely. The odds of it happening are so far stretched. I don't think we're going to see it.
Gave us a good 2 weeks of conversation, though.
Well, Arizona State was the conversation around it, right? But now they've kind of dropped off the radar, losing to Minnesota State, then again to Alaska. So they don't have even a chance if they added a game. There's no benefit. There's nobody that would benefit with them to do it. We had talked, I think, about AIC as a potential partner, but that doesn't make sense to AIC now either. So
how about the game that Arizona State added against Northeastern that Northeastern lost? How bad does that hurt Northeastern?
Well, they're the bubble team right now. I think if you really use the numbers I crunched and not just look at the PairWise, just use straight odds, they are the bubble team. Would that be something that, revisionist history, as I always say, hindsight is 20/20, but I always say hindsight's 50/50 because you don't know if it was good. You don't know if it was bad. Once you have to look back on it, then you maybe can make the decision. I don't think Jerry Keefe probably regrets adding that game. And then don't forget, they also have 2 non-conference games coming up that can help them a little bit here in the Beanpot. They need to take care of business tonight and next Monday, and that could really solidify their position within the PairWise.
Does that really help them much, though? I mean, these are teams that are down in the PairWise. This is the weakest Beanpot in living memory anyway, right?
It's true.
We talked about that last week.
Yep, it is. And so it's possible that it won't help them a ton, just because they're non-conference games. I somehow have to remind myself that, we can't look at the PairWise in a bubble, and non-conference games are good when you talk about your entire league. So yeah, you're right. They might not help them. They're going to play Boston College tonight. They can't lose it and keep a good position, keep any good footing within the PairWise. But you win this, you win next week against Harvard BU. BU has helped themselves. They've moved themselves right up into the PairWise. They're, still, very slim chance of getting in. I had them around 27%, which is not nothing, but there's still a 73% chance BU will miss the tournament. And we're also factoring in whether BU can, win the Hockey East tournament and into that, which, probably has about a 7-8% chance. But all that said, Northeastern can't afford any more losses.
Jim, I want your draft. I'm going to use a company. I want your odds on, give me your winners tonight in the Beanpot.
Well, the irony, as a bettor myself, you're supposed to play trends. And I would say that the two teams that probably should win the two games are Northeastern and Harvard. Tonight is the 69th edition of the Beanpot. Northeastern and Harvard have never both won on semifinal Monday. They have never faced each other in the championship game in 68 prior Beanpots. BC or BU has been involved in every single championship game. So you're supposed to play trends as a bettor. That's a pretty darn good trend. So I had said it, I guess it was yesterday. I was talking to somebody about the Beanpot. My picks would be BU and Northeastern in next week's final.
I would not go to online betting on that right now. You did not convince me one bit. I can't bet, but you didn't convince me of anything to do. You just told me Northeastern Harvard, you go Northeastern BU. A good thing I don't bet.
Oh, and when you talk about trends like those from year to year in college sports, so much changes year to year, so much changes from era to era. You've got a couple of new coaches, relatively new coaches in the mix. You've got players missing. You've got,
Ed, I just gave you 70 years of history.
I'm impressed.
Wasn't that enough?
I'm impressed.
I'm impressed by the history, but yeah. All right. Well, I'm not betting on them anyway. I find a little excitement in wagering. So I guess we have that as a difference, but we'll wrap things there. This podcast episode has been brought to you by DCU Digital Federal Credit Union. What will DCU mean to you? Find out today by visiting dcu.org. Membership required. For Jim Connelly, for Derek Schooley, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Weekend Review Podcast, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.